Hello and welcome to the Merri-Cast, the show that puts you on the fast track to confidence in starting and growing your business. Now, many of us are introverts, and so is our guest this week on the Merri-Cast. I'm joined by Melitta Campbell, otherwise known as the Value Whisperer. She's a business and leadership coach, TEDx speaking, best-selling author, and yes, an unapologetic introvert. In this episode, Melitta shares how she went from being an introverted child to coaching female founders to sell themselves and their services with clarity and confidence. And her journey is impressive, to say the least, as well as being very inspiring. As we join her, Melitta tells how her introversion started early.
I definitely grew up a shy child, and I didn't have a bad upbringing, but I was shy, and so I had a tendency to mumble, and then adults would talk over you, and at that point you kind of, well, I certainly made the conclusion that, well, no one's really interested in what I have to say, so I'll just stay quiet. And that served me pretty well. I got my head down. I didn't cause any trouble. I was a good team player. So throughout school and university and my early career, it served me fine until I lost my job and I had to interview. For 6 months, I was interviewing and kept getting thrown out of interviews, and until I had one interview. And I was so confident going into it because it was for the British government as part of their communication pool. And you had to send in your CV, but also do a strategy beforehand. And I passed that. And there were just so many hoops you had to go through to get to the interview at the end. It's a bit like The Apprentice, but condensed. So going into the interview, I thought, oh, I've made it. I've got here. I've done everything great. And then I was thrown out of that interview within 10 minutes. But when I asked why, and at first I thought it was part of the interview because I've seen, what was it, that TV show about the government with the old
Yes,
doctor who
Minister?
in it.
Oh,
Sorry?
no, I was going to say yes, Minister, but maybe not that one too.
Later than that. I can't remember. And
Oh,
they're just,
the thick of it, the thick of it.
yes, and they're always
Yes.
swearing at each other and they're quite aggressive. So I thought, oh, maybe it's a preparation to see if you can cut it within the British government. So I was like, oh, is this part of the interview? And she's like, no, get out. And so I asked why. I didn't really understand where I'd gone wrong because I'd said everything I'd said in all the other interviews and I thought I was doing okay. And then she pointed out that, all I'd said is, well, we did this and we did that. And she assumed that I was passing someone else's work off as my own. And I was just shocked. Like, well, there was no one else. I was working for small companies. I was the only person, doing all the strategy and the implementation of all the marketing and communications. So it was a big eye opener. Admittedly, I cried all the way home and probably for the next few
Oh.
days. But after that, I realized, yeah, she was right. I really need to own my value. And my next interview a couple of weeks later, I went through and I really said, I know I'm good at this, and this is why I came up with this strategy and how I implemented it. And I owned my mistakes as well, and in this case, it didn't work, but here's what that taught me. And before I even got home, they called me to say I had the job. So it was a big lesson in we have to own our own value and be proud of that and communicate it. But also, it made me realize that sometimes that's quite difficult to do because we're not really taught that it's okay to do that. When we kind of learn that we can't talk about our successes because that's bad and that's bragging and no one wants that. And we can't talk about our wins because our weaknesses rather, because that shows that we're a failure and no one wants to hear about that either. So you kind of end up stuck in the middle, the same as everyone else, and it's quite hard therefore to stand out. And so I think it's once you embrace all of that and you're honest and you can just choose the bits that highlight the value you can bring to the next opportunity or that person in front of you, then it actually makes you very human and you can bring people in towards you. It's quite magnetic doing that. So that was something that I realized and used throughout my career, and my career really took off then. So I was working for Lloyds TSB in London. I got several promotions, got moved to Geneva, several promotions here. But then I had children and started my own business. And it was what I realized when I was networking is the other business owners around me were struggling with the same thing. They hadn't learned that lesson of how to talk about their value in a way that connects with people, brings the right people into their business, but without feeling pushy or braggy or anything like that, because nobody really wants that.
Okay, and so I mean, you're in the financial sector. Was it a financial sector discipline? Was it finance background or was it marketing? What was your sort of professional background in that
My
sense?
my degree was in design management, so not finance at all. I can't even read numbers actually. I'm just calculate. And then my career was built in marketing and communications. And I was really fortunate along the way to have some incredible mentors as well. And mostly men, but they were very encouraging. So I never felt held back by being a woman in business until I moved to Geneva. And then I saw that there were a lot of women here that hadn't had that same support and mentorship. So I started a women's network to help them see that they had just as much value to offer the company and how to communicate that. So that was really my first lesson in sharing my lessons further, and to see just how quickly, once they gained the confidence, and they didn't have to change anything about who they were or what they were doing, but just had that bit more confidence that they were in the right place and that they could speak up. And as soon as they did, things started to change for them. And then this beautiful ripple effect started to happen as well. So,
So
um,
you'd come from the UK then, and so
yeah,
you're in the situation where the way women were viewed in careers, was slightly different. I mean, were you seen as some sort of radical firebrand then amongst, in terms of sort of parachuted in and then, stirring up trouble, if you like? I don't want to
uh,
exaggerate it, but what was it like? Did it feel like a big cultural change for you and for them?
it was a big cultural change, but it didn't happen fast. So I was still quiet and shy, but I had the confidence to speak up when I felt I could add value and meaning. And I learned how to make connections and how to build my own personal brand and reputation around my key areas. So if I was meeting and someone said something and it was just, I didn't agree with it, but it had nothing to do with my kind of area, then I just let that slide so that I wasn't muddying the waters. People really quickly got to understand my values, what I stood for, what I represented, and where my line was. So even if they didn't agree with my views, they always respected that. So that really helped me in Geneva to progress as well. But that's yeah, I just saw that the women here had been told once too many times that, oh, you can't do that because you're a girl. And after a while you start to believe it, and it's just not true. And it's not just women that are affected by this, oh, you're too quiet for this. There's always we're always told that we can't do things because of something that someone's picked up on, but we need to override that and think, well, hold on a minute, I want to do this. I think I can do a good job. So I'm just not going to listen to you. But but that has to come from within, from that own self-belief.
Okay. And so did you at this point, I mean, you were employed by somebody else. So how did it transfer then to you being employed to then you setting up your own business? Was there a sudden moment where you thought, I've got to do this, or did it happen by accident? I mean, how did it come about?
Yeah, kind of by accident. I always thought it'd be quite fun to run your own company and to be able to do whatever you want to do. But then at the same time, it's like, but what could I do? And it's quite a bold thing to do. But then, as I said, I had children, and here in Switzerland, I didn't have a support network. I couldn't get childcare. There just isn't enough here. And there was no part-time working. So I didn't really have a choice. I loved my job so much, but I just couldn't return. So I decided that I thought maybe I could just write newsletters for people in nap times or something. Because at that time I was really thinking I just want to keep my hand in, so that in a couple of years, when I go back to the office, I haven't lost contact with my skills completely. Because I'd seen quite often women leave the office, come back after having children, and they just don't have the same confidence, and they don't show up well, and it doesn't go well for them often. I think thankfully things are changing now. People are brought back in a more structured way with coaching, but yeah, that wasn't the case. So I'll just keep my hand in. I just happened to mention to someone that, oh, maybe this is what I could do. She knew someone that was looking for someone to write a newsletter. She put me in touch. It happened to be someone that I knew because I was a co-founder of the Geneva Communicators Network. So I had quite a big network in that area. I was well known. And yeah, that was it. They were like, great, we'd love to work with you. And it was
Immediately prior to that, though, I mean, when you made that decision, or even if it was more accidental than rather than design, did you, I mean, were there people around you who said, "What are you doing? You know, you've got a nice job there. You know, why do you want to sort of go self-employed?" Or was it, or did people support you all the way? I mean, did you have doubts yourself as well?
I had so many doubts, and I didn't really know what I was doing. But I just thought, yeah, I can write newsletters. That's easy. I'll do that. I hadn't really thought of it as starting my own business at that point, and everybody was really supportive around me. And it's still the idea in Switzerland that you should mum stay at home is still very much part of the culture. It is changing very slowly. So it wasn't a weird thing for me to give up my career and look after the kids. But the idea of doing something that was people were very supportive, but I got a lot, particularly from other mums, a lot of comments that, well, that's great, but I would love to do something like that, but I could never do that. And I was like, but why? You are all like brilliant, confident women, and I just am so shy. If I can do it, anyone can do it. But they were just really adamant that they couldn't do that. And I think starting your own business, becoming an entrepreneur, anyone can do it. There's no real, there's no barrier to entry. It's just, but you need to believe or want to do it. I think you need to be able to imagine yourself in that capacity. Otherwise, imposter syndrome comes when we have a change of identity very often. And I think people just can't shift that identity. They have just such a big block around, well, I don't belong in that kind of world. They can't see themselves being successful. So they don't ever dare to try. And it's a shame because, trying is the only way to get started and discover what it really takes.
So just take me through the process then of, so you start off writing newsletters, one thing leads to another, and you're sort of, chugging along, sort of doing this. And then in 2018, I think you set up your coaching business. I mean,
Yeah.
so take me through that evolution from writing about stuff to coaching stuff.
So the business took off quite quickly. As I said, I had a pre-existing network of people that knew me and knew my skills. And when I was working for people doing the newsletters, just the way I was writing it and the questions I was asking, they could quickly see that I wasn't just a copywriter, that I actually knew communication strategy and leadership communications. And so, yeah, one thing led to another. I ended up writing speeches and articles for some of the most influential men in the world. It was quite surreal, like bouncing a baby under my desk. And it was fun for a while, but there was no learning. It was all stuff that I could do. And it was just something that I could do and get paid for. It wasn't something I was passionate about. So after I did that for about 8 years, but I started to burn out because it was just there was nothing in it for me. It wasn't giving me energy. It was just paying the bills, which just isn't enough, really. So I started to look at, well, what else could I do? And at that point, while I was networking, I was getting approached by women who had started their own business. Maybe they were a coach or an expert doing some kind of consultancy. And they knew they were good at what they did, but they couldn't get clients, or certainly couldn't get enough of the right kind of clients because they couldn't communicate their value. So they were asking me for help in start like building their business. And at first I said no, because I was like, no, but I do communications. Well, I don't know about like business development. But then once I had more conversations with these women, I saw actually there's a lot that I can do to help them. And I knew from the work that I did with the Women's Network and my own experience, it's not just having a perfect marketing plan and knowing, oh, this is how to run a sales call, which a lot of them struggled with as well. So we moved into that too. They had to believe it if they don't really believe in their values. So I call it value whispering now because we start with really helping them understand their unique value and what that means to their niche. So it's the value in context. And I think this is where people struggle. They kind of know they're great at stuff, but it's not pinned down for their niche and they don't necessarily have a niche and know their angle into that niche as well. They have the information, but they don't know what to do with it.
Just talking about, you setting up the coaching business, you specifically coach female founders, and obviously you alluded to that in one of your previous answers about, sort of networks of women and so on. I mean, I mean, there are sort of underconfident men around as well. Would you have turned them away at that point, or was it just that that was your niche? But if others wanted to come along and be coached by you, that was fine too.
Yeah, I've worked with several men over the years, but women was my network because I had the women's network that I founded, and then I was in this area. It was a French speaking area, and my French is okay, but I can't quite keep up with a networking conversation. So I tend to go to the English speaking ones, and the ones in this area, they're all women's networks. Plus, I was networking with a lot of mums because I had young kids at that time. So just my world was women. So that made the obvious start point. But the other thing that I like about working with women is that I think when they start a business, they're starting from below zero because not many women have in their existing network other women who have started a successful business. I see with most men, they know at least one other self-employed man or a director or a CEO or someone that's been at that kind of level running a business, whereas women don't have that same network or certainly don't see women doing that. Plus, they are having to communicate and stand up for themselves and tell people they're brilliant, often for the first time as well. As I said, particularly in this region, that just isn't a skill that women are taught. And men don't often feel confident doing that. Because I used to do leadership coaching and I coached 60 men in the banking industry. And I know a lot of them didn't feel comfortable communicating at all, but they would kind of fake it till they made it kind of thing. They would see other people doing it and think, oh, I have to do this. Whereas women don't see other people doing it and think, well, I'm not sure I can, so I'll just stay quiet. And then they start their own business and then they have to do that, but on their own behalf and really sell themselves. So it was really tricky. So it's quite rewarding working with women because, for those reasons. And I've also knew from the women's network I ran that when you have a group of women that are really supporting and encouraging each other, then that just becomes such a solid foundation of strength for growth and confidence as well. So yeah, I love working with women, but I do work with a handful of men, yeah.
Okay, and so tell me about then value whispering, because that's a phrase I've heard you use sort of quite a lot in the various videos that I watched. I mean, how did that phrase come about to start with, and why did you use it, in terms of describing, the blueprint that you're offering people?
Yeah. So, I was calling myself a business coach, but I didn't really like that term because coaching very often you're bringing the best out of someone. You're bringing out what they already know. But as I just said, women when they're starting a business, there's a lot that they don't know. So there is, turning to them and saying, "What do you want to do with your business?" They're like, "Well, I don't know," and they genuinely don't know. So there is an aspect of coaching because they do have a lot of transferable skills that they haven't realized. And I'm also a certified mindset coach now. So bringing out their mindset is a really key thing, helping them work through that and then confidence, imposter syndrome, all of that stuff that really gets triggered when you're doing new things. But then my expertise is in marketing, communications, and sales. So I wanted to bring that aspect into my work. And that's why most people come to me is for that background. There are other business coaches with a legal background or a finance background, but that's, I'm more the sort of marketing communications field. And so I wanted it to reflect that. But also I do mentoring and training and, it's all mixed up. So I thought I just need to come up with something that's completely different and would give me a chance to really explain my process and my system. So when I took a step back and looked at it, it's starting with looking at what is the value in context that someone has and how do you translate that into a clear offer. And then we weave that value through everything they're doing, through their marketing, their messaging, their sales, so that they don't have to shout to be heard and for their value to come across powerfully. It's naturally woven into everything that they're doing. So other people really experience that. So that was the whispering part, because a lot of the people that I was working with, they really didn't want to be loud or pushy or aggressive. And I know we were talking about that previously with the sales masterclass I ran recently, where a lot of people really avoid sales because they don't want to be seen in that way. But actually, sales done well has got nothing to do with that. So the whispering aspect was really how we build this value into everything you do. And then the third part of the process is the self-leadership, the mindset, the productivity, the habits that you build, because this is what is really going to make you succeed or not. As I said, you can have the perfect plan, but if you don't believe in your ability to deliver on that plan and that you're in the right place, then it's never going to work for you. So it's those three things together.
I mean, it made me think about, stereotypes around what sales is really. Like you think about the quote pushy salesman, because in those days it might have been more likely to have been a man. This thing about pushing a product on, and actually a lot of selling these days, is not about sort of self promotion or bothering people. And I saw in the YouTube video that you did recently, it was about busting those myths. I mean, so these myths are still lingering big time in the world about what it is to sell, I guess.
Yeah. And I think there's a big reason for that. And it's when we think of selling, as you said, we think of pushy, sleazy, being manipulative, and the same for marketing to an extent as well, because we've all experienced people that do it badly. So when we have someone who is like that, who is a bit more pushy and aggressive, then we don't like that experience and we don't want to conflict that on anyone else because it doesn't align with who we are. But the truth is, when sales is done well, if you go back and think about a time when you've enjoyed buying something and you felt really good about that product and you knew it was the right thing for you, and you looked at, well, how do you describe that situation? How would you describe that salesperson? You would say things like, oh, they took the time to listen to me. They asked me great questions. They put up some suggestions and tried to really understand what I was looking for. And we don't use this aggressive, pushy language. So we don't necessarily equate that experience with a sales experience because it doesn't match our preconception. But the truth is, the people that are pushy and aggressive are always consistently in the bottom 50% of salespeople. And the people that are at the top are those who have a conversation, who care, who listen. And you really can't sell to people without their permission. And there's two levels of that. It's the permission to speak in the first place, to have someone's time and attention, and then the permission to sell once you feel that you've understood them enough and you've got something that could help them. So understanding that is really very polite and nice and lovely. You're creating a lovely experience. So yeah, I think the part of the reason the myth stays is because we don't realize that sales done well is very different. We haven't kind of overwritten that in our experience.
Has pushy sales, it still exists. I mean, has it changed its form now? Because we see it on sort of LinkedIn, messages. You connect with somebody and straight away they're sort of trying to flog something to you, or you get the spam emails and so on. I mean, it feels to me as though in some ways that there's a sort of separation going on, that there's that kind of sort of pushy sales which is all over the place and you just have to sort of dodge it, as you're going through your through your day. But the quality of the other types of sales, of the sort of consultative sales, I mean, I'm hoping that you're going to say that quality has risen as well. I mean, are we seeing a sort of a wheat and chaff moment of sort of, the quality of some types of sales has sort of gone up, but there is some dreadful pushy selling going on as well, usually online.
Yeah, I mean, I can only go from my own experience. I don't know if it's been quantified at all. I know Lisa McLeod did some research into the pushy aggressive sales within a corporate environment and saw that the pushy ones were just always never the ones that were successful. But yeah, I'm like you, it's every other, people will send you an email or a LinkedIn request and already you just groan because you just know, oh, they're just going to pitch to me. But then, I've had some incredible conversations with people and I've bought things from them. They've bought things from me, but it's all was born first through having a conversation, understanding that person. A lady came on my podcast called Natalie Carthew, and she said, I would like to think of people as people of interest. And then it's our responsibility to find out in which way are they interesting. So maybe it's as a friend, maybe it's as a guide or an expert or a potential client or a potential supporter. There's so many roles the people we meet can take in our lives, but not everyone is going to be a potential client. So we mustn't assume that. First, it's better to assume they're interesting in some way, but and then almost play that game to find out in which way. So I really like that approach. And I think when people message you and they're in that sort of mode, and you can really play and have a lovely conversation, and you just never know where your next hello will take you. And networking was always something that I really struggled with as a shy person. I wrote a book about that, The Shy Girl's Guide to Networking. But now I love it because all the best opportunities, all the best clients have come from genuine networking. So yeah, I think, and I don't think pushy sales, one, it doesn't work, and two, it doesn't feel good to anyone either. So I think most of us would much rather have that kind of conversation anyway.
So, I mean, if we talk about the networking side of things, I mean, given what you've told me so far about, your character and how you sort of came to this and so on, do you nevertheless feel, like for example, if you've been at a networking event that you come away and you still, as an introvert, feel drained after it? I mean, do you still have those kind of feelings sort of coming back to you, in spite of the fact that you've got a business where you're talking about introverted sales? Does it ever sort of drain you as well as inspire you?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I have to be very mindful of my social battery. But what I'll do is I'll try and make sure that coming up to that event that I haven't got anything draining or new. Because one thing with introverts that's also draining is novelty. So anything that's new or different. So I'll just have a very boring couple of days beforehand so I can really show up and have my best energy. And then I'll make sure that I haven't got anything planned for the next day as well. Nothing too social or draining, so I can just really recuperate. So I think it's just finding that balance on what works for you. And one of the things that helped me to network was just creating my own rules of engagement. And one of those was that if I can turn up and I just, after 5 minutes, I'm just not feeling it, I don't have the energy, that's okay. I can either leave or I can go and take a walk, sit outside in a park, read a book for a bit, and then go back. Because before I was pushing myself to go get there early, to stay the whole way. I thought that's what you had to do. And then I was just like, this is ridiculous because I wasn't showing up as my best. I was exhausted and therefore I wasn't having good quality conversations. And so then I'd beat myself up about that afterwards. So I really wasn't helping myself at all. But as soon as I decided, I've got to do what feels right for me, then everything changed.
You've mentioned a book. I can see it behind you. I mean, listeners won't be able to see this, but The Shy Girl's Guide to Networking. Are you writing a new book as well at the moment, or is as
Yes.
well? Yeah, yeah. Do you want to tell us
Yeah.
about
So
that? Are you
I'm
able to
currently
tell us about that?
writing.
Can you give us a sneaky peek, maybe? So,
I'd be happy to.
okay.
Campbell, then I have to finish it. It's almost finished. I'm just writing the last chapter, and my editor's already working on the first half. But it's going to be the art of value whispering. So showing people how to go through. It's kind of the book of the show of my program that I take my clients through. So starting to look at where is your value? How do I identify that? Who is your niche? How do I identify that and feel confident in it? How to kind of look at where the two overlap. So that's really your value sweet spot. And then when you build your marketing, your sales from that space, then you're naturally differentiated and it becomes much easier to talk about your business because you're not trying to do the same as everyone else. You know what makes you different and it's much easier to confidently talk about your value from that space. So it goes, I wanted it to be like a personal journey, sharing lots of stories from me and my clients, but also highly practical that you could actually follow it step by step if you wanted to, because it drives me a bit mad when I read business books like, oh, that will make sense, but how? What do
Mm.
I do? So it's got a lot of what to do all the way through it with some additional bonuses because some parts were just really slowing the book down. So I thought I'll make that a bonus chapter that people can have outside the book if they want it. So it really goes through the marketing, the sales, messaging, creating your offers, and then also the self-leadership. How do you manage your energy? How do you be productive? Because I feel that this is really personal, depending on your stage of life, your personality, your situation, what's going to help you be productive is very different. So we look at how you can find what makes you productive and bring that, like consciously bring that into your day, create boundaries so you can do your best work, but without burning out, like I did in my first business, and build that self belief constantly as well. So you can keep imposter syndrome at bay as well and just not necessarily be fearless because we want to listen to our fears and what they're telling us, but you become, limitless, if you like, as you go forward. Whatever you want to achieve, you can by creating success, creating the right environment for your success.
I mean, I'm going to say it, to spare your blushes on this. I thought I went to your YouTube channel. I thought there's a whole load of great material in there, including the Introverted sort of sales podcast and the TEDx talk and sort of various other things. And I'd encourage listeners to go and it's that the thing I love about it is it feels completely authentic, in the fact that you are very comfortable in your skin as an introvert, if you like, talking about these things. You've kind of lived there, you've been there. One question I've got though, as an entrepreneur, what do you struggle with in terms of, cranking the entrepreneurial sort of handle? Everybody has things that they love doing, that they're passionate about, and I think listeners can probably hear some of those things sort of, resonating loud and clear. But what would be your like Achilles heel, something that you're a bit rubbish at as a as an entrepreneur? Just because listeners probably want to hear, whether somebody else who's being successful also struggles with certain things. It's kind of brings a sort of it just brings an air of sort of reality to it, that we all struggle with certain things.
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot I struggle with. So part of the reason that I do these videos and masterclasses and talks is to keep pushing that comfort zone, because if I don't do that, I will shrink back and, I'll hide and I'll become really shy. And I'm not very good at being bold. So that's something that I always work with a coach for that reason, so they can help keep me going in the direction that I want to go, that I know I can. But then I keep getting that, oh yeah, but it's just little old me. So, and case in point, just yesterday I started reaching out to some really big names for my podcast. So, they can only say no, and they've all said yes. And I'm just like really bowled over that, when we are bold and we are within our zone of genius, then, great things happen, but we just have to ask for them. So I'm not very good at that. Also, I have ADHD as well. I think I'm just hearing more and more female entrepreneurs, especially, as I said, that's my network. So it may be the same for the men as well. But every day almost someone else is saying, oh, I just found out I've got ADHD. So I'm kind of wondering if you have to have that to be an entrepreneur. And it does mean that I can juggle a lot of things and hold a lot of ideas and make a lot of things happen. But at the same time, it does mean that I'm not always organized and great at the follow-up. So, but I have a VA who's brilliant at that. So she really helps fill in the gaps. And very often people ask like how I do it all. How do you do this? How do you get on, like, run a podcast and a business, and you're doing these talks and you're doing the others? And I'd say, well, several things. One, I don't do it all at the same time. It's one thing at a time. And two, there's a lot that I don't do. So I really don't do a lot of the things that waste time. I married well, so my husband cooks and cleans and helps with the laundry as well. So I don't buy things that need ironing. So there's a lot of things that I don't do that allow me to have that focused time for the things that are meaningful. But I think that comes with knowing what your success environment is and what productivity tools and processes work for you personally, because it hasn't always worked out. And I do have those moments where you're just like, oh my gosh, how can I possibly do all of this? But in those moments, I just take a step back and remind myself of what works for me and break things down smaller. But yeah, I think it's always a juggle. I think we always feel that there's so many things we could do and want to do that you're always chasing that next thing. But yeah, experience has taught me to appreciate the moment, really appreciate the great things that do happen, and to internalize that so you can feel like you're in the right place and feel that success. I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't do that, particularly in the early stages. And taking enough time for your self-care. That's my big productivity tip, because the longer I do this, the more people I coach through their business, the more I see the link between self-care and success. That self-care, self-respect, self-compassion, you have to have that to make your business work. Otherwise, sooner or later, everything's going to crash and burn.
You were saying that always chasing the what's next, if you like. But I am going to ask that question, I'm afraid. So I mean, okay, you've talked about the book already, but what's next? I mean, how does the business develop from here? What's in the business plan, basically,
Mm.
that you can tell me
Well,
about?
The book is the big thing. I'm planning that for September. So everything is focused on that up until then. The next thing I would love to do is to continue getting out and speaking more on podcasts and stages about this idea that you don't have to be loud and pushy to be successful. And since my TED talk, I've been asked by more and more like workplaces, corporates, to bring that message into their groups as well. So I'm looking at launching a sort of beta offer around that in the autumn as well. So yeah, that feels like it's going to be full circle. It's bringing me back to the leadership coaching and the women's network I ran before I started this whole journey. So I'm quite looking forward to testing that and seeing what happens there. But yeah, I've learned that wherever you start is never where you end up in business. So yeah, I'll see where the next path takes me.
Okay, and then let's finish by looking back in terms of what you've learned, along the way. I mean, if we think about you sort of taking your first tentative steps into the employment market, first of all, I mean, would you have recognised the person that you've sort of become, and what would you have said to your younger self, if you like, now you look back at it?
Gosh. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because in the moment, you're just looking at that next thing, you're really in the struggle. And so you don't necessarily recognize how far you've come. But I think that is what I would always recommend is taking these moments to look back and see. And I do it on my podcast once a year. We have the planisodes to do that specifically with people, and I get do it with my clients every 6 months. It's just like, hold on a minute, what's happened, recently that you're proud of, and it's just incredible how far you've come. But sometimes it helps to have other people reflect that back to you. I remember telling a friend, this is my plan, and I want to do this and this and this, and she's like, isn't that what you're doing already? And I was like, huh, yep, it is exactly what I'm doing already, but just my vision is that big, like, huge plan, and I'd missed that I was already doing it, maybe on a smaller scale, but it was everything that I had envisioned was already happening. And I quite like asking my clients and myself sometimes the question, like, what if your big, hairy, audacious goal isn't somewhere out in the future, but it's a place for you to come from instead of to grow to? And yeah, I think looking back, that's maybe that would be the advice I would give myself, because I think that's quite an exciting space to work from, thinking that you're already in that goal, but how can you just expand it out rather than, always chasing that next thing.
Now, I love that last bit about the importance of reflecting on how far you've come and not just focusing on what's next. I mean, sometimes when you climb the mountain, you need to allow yourself time to admire the view of what you've achieved already. And let's think about some of the other things that Melitta has told us in this interview. She had a bad job interview herself and learnt the importance of owning her value. She was really convincing on how quiet leadership can be more compelling than loud self promotion. And she showed us how introverts can create their own networking rules and thrive on their own terms. Most important for me personally, she debunked the myth that salespeople must be pushy. Now, I'd like you all to look out for Melitta's new book, The Art of Value Whispering, and it's due for release later this year. So thank you to Melitta, and thank you to our growing band of listeners and the great feedback that we're getting on this show. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate and review through your usual podcast provider. And if you want to find out more about the Merri-Cast, look for me, Trevor Meriden, or our business Merriborn on merriborn.co.uk. And until then, thanks for listening.